Carolina football is spiraling out of control right now. And I think what's pretty fascinating about this conversation is that if you go back and talk about July or August, everybody made it sound like that Bill Belichick was going to have a quick turnaround. They were going to win 10 games, no problem, because they had such an easy schedule, and that they would be competing with Clemson and Florida State and all those other teams. So I guess just the how quickly the pendulum switches for me, it's just pretty intriguing as someone who covers the sport and has just probably just watched countless people talk about how great North Carolina is going to be. And then those same people are talking about how Bill Belichick needs to be fired tomorrow. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that he deserves to get fired because, yeah, sure, if you're paying someone $10 million a year, you're not expecting him to go, 6-6 every year. However, we've only seen 5 games. So I think we just need to, pause and reflect a little bit and just most importantly, just kind of see, hey, what are the good things they got going? What are the bad things they have going? And most importantly, what do they need to do in order to improve? And there's a lot of layers to this too. It's not as simple as, oh, North Carolina is getting their ass kicked by Power 4 schools. I don't think it's necessarily that simple. I mean, if you go back to last year with Mac Brown, I think just the unceremonious firing of Mac Brown. I mean, they even said late November that Mac Brown even told everyone like, hey, like I want to come back. I plan on being here. And then pretty much Bubba Cunningham and North Carolina essentially told him like, hey, we're not even going to let you finish the season, dude. Like you're done. I mean, we'll let you resign, quote unquote, if you want to, but that didn't really end up happening. And, I definitely think if I was a North Carolina fan, I would definitely feel the wrong way about how North Carolina handled that. I think it could have been a lot more tactful, especially when you think about how they disagreed to a 1-year contract extension back in February of 2023 before that too. So for somebody who has dedicated a lot to, that program and, for all the success that he's had, even though, yes, you've had some shortcomings with, maybe some of your coordinator hires, for example, or just, not being as successful as you should have been with some of the quarterbacks that you've had. I mean, it's one of those things where, it's really unfortunate, but nevertheless, Bill Belichick comes in, 6-time Super Bowl champion. He brings in his son, Steve, to coach the defense. Mike Lombardi, who has been out of the NFL for quite a while now, becomes your general manager. And, you say to yourself after watching that TCU game and most importantly, that Clemson game previously, and you're just like, what the heck is going on here? And I think what's really missing from North Carolina, most importantly right now, is they just feel like a team that just doesn't seem passionate or excited. They seem like a team that's checked out. But I'd say outside of that too, like there's no identity to this team. And it feels very similar to how the Bill Belichick seasons were after Tom Brady went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, if that's even a good comparison. I think that's probably what's missing more than anything else, because I think everybody knew to some degree, right, that North Carolina was going to have a bunch of turnover. They brought in 40-plus kids. You're transitioning from one of the most successful head coaches at North Carolina, probably of all time, really, or at least within the immediate past 20 years, to a guy that you're essentially giving him all the resources that he needs. You're giving him a huge contract, and you expect immediate results. And, when you think of the history of North Carolina football, I mean, you go back and you think of, the Mac Brown tenure from 2019 to 2024, a indifferent tenure with Larry Fedora. I mean, he came in from Southern Miss, and, he was a solid coach, but just wasn't anything spectacular. I mean, he was 11-1 in that 2015 season. That was a lot of fun to watch. And then outside of that, I mean, you think of the what if with Butch Jones from 2007 to 2010. I think that's one of those ones that I think a lot of North Carolina fans were going to think about, because they were, relatively successful under Butch Jones too. If you don't count the years where he technically lost, some of those games, but nevertheless, I mean, it's just one of those things with North Carolina where I just think you just have to be, pretty concerned about what's going on. Do I think it's salvageable? Yeah, 100%. I think so. I mean, to be able to dismiss a guy after 5 games, I'm like, that's a bit much. I mean, unless he pulls like an Urban Meyer, which I guess he's halfway there considering the Hard Knocks debacle. He's pretty much letting his girlfriend, you know, run the program and run the public relations. So there's definitely some pretty serious concerns if you're thinking about it from that perspective. So that's something that I am definitely concerned about if you're a North Carolina fan. Just not even so much on the field because, yes, I mean, you brought in a guy like Gio Lopez who you're expecting to be a little bit better. He, is a sophomore coming in from South Alabama. You're expecting a lot more out of him. And then, when you have some really good players like the Mario Hamptons of the world and, some solid playmakers on defense, you're just expecting more out of them. And then you turn around and now you say, oh, this is a rebuild. We're going to need some time. So it's just one of those things where a lot of the things that we're seeing that they were struggling on last year are coming up again this year. And, for anyone who watched 2024 North Carolina, I mean, those things were just the horrific defense coached by none other than Jeff Collins. I mean, I go back and I forget what game it was, but when they gave up like a 65-yard run with like 30 seconds left to lose the game, I forget which game that was, but outside of that, outside of the defensive debacle, I mean, it's really just the lack of discipline that you're seeing too. Now, granted, Max Johnson has been their starting quarterback, and yeah, the rhythm and the chemistry is probably a little off to some degree as well. But when when Clemson's walking in and finishing 20-24 after the third quarter for 274 yards and 4 touchdowns, I mean, it's just inexcusable at this point, especially when one of the hallmarks of a Bill Belichick coach team is just how well disciplined that they're supposed to be. So to finish the game with 8 penalties and 75 yards, and also some debacles on special teams, it definitely is pretty disappointing too. And even the Chancellor Lee Roberts, who I would argue is actually responsible for this hire, he gave an interview a couple weeks ago and he said, and I quote, "It's not the kind of thing that we judge after 4 games or even after 1 season. These things take time. We won the last conference championship in 1980. We have significant work to do." So, I mean, the good news is I think North Carolina can be somewhat of an attractive job despite the lack of successes in terms of overall conference championships and, the lack of consistency. I think we can all kind of point that out to some degree, but, also you have to be excited at the prospect of them at least saying, you know what, we're going to commit more resources to the football team. Kenan Field is a beautiful place to play. You can still get solid recruits down in Chapel Hill. I mean, you can definitely target in the Northeast a little bit. You can always go out west a little bit. And not to mention, too, as long as NC State is Dave Doran, I don't know how much you really have to worry about North Carolina State, at least in the interim, even though you have other teams surrounding you like the Virginias of the world. Wake Forest is having a way better season than I think anyone anticipated. Virginia Tech, once when they hire their new coach, they have $100 million going to football. So it's only going to get harder in the ACC. Now, granted, a lot of people like to, criticize the ACC or sit there and say that they've taken a step back. But one thing the ACC has going for them is they're one of the more competitive conferences in all college football. It's one of those things you really can never anticipate in terms of, who do you think is going to end up winning the ACC, especially now. I mean, even Pittsburgh Panthers, I mean, they can have a run at it as far as I know, but they're playing Cal tonight. That I think that could be a difficult game for them, but at the same time too, I think Cal's a way better team than people gave credit for it. I've done I did a podcast on them a couple months ago, so you should check out that. But North Carolina is just in a very vulnerable spot right now, and in order for them to get it together, I think at this point you really just have to kind of ride the wave. I mean, the good news is I said this in my preview. North Carolina, they have a pretty favorable schedule. Let's just even let's just say they don't take care of Cal. Let's say they lose to Cal and lose to Virginia. You have a dicey Syracuse team that you really don't know what to expect. You have Stanford and Wake Forest, I think, are both arguably pretty winnable. You have a Duke team that is only surging right now, and I think can definitely beat Georgia Tech this weekend. And then and then obviously you have your final game against NC State. So, I mean, I think there definitely is a plausible situation where we can still see North Carolina go 6-6 this year and make a bowl game. If you can salvage this season and just go 6-6 and say, you know what, we made it through. We're not giving up as many points. We're taking this in stride. Maybe there's a world where we can figure this out. But for right now, I think North Carolina seems like a football team that is trending in the wrong direction, which is really disappointing because I definitely want to see Bill Belichick succeed. And I think it's great for college football that he is a part of it. However, in order for these things to happen, it needs to happen sooner than later. But I think also people need to be a little bit more patient with just the overall progression in terms of North Carolina football, because I think if you sat there and said to yourself, oh, they should just walk in and win 9-10 games, no problem, despite the easy schedule, I think you are mistaken. So, I mean, I think we need to be a little more patient with them, but overall, you know, he's going to maybe get one. He's obviously going to get it this year, but, you know, next season, 2026, I think that's where you're really kind of saying to yourself, hey, we need to see some serious evidence that North Carolina can contend for an ACC championship.